Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Rider Magazine, and today we're out here talking about the 2021 Aprilia Tuono 660. Now, if you guys think about the Aprilia lineup as a whole, this machine is a really important piece of it because it's now the second middleweight sport motorcycle in its lineup, which includes the RS 660, the fully fared super sport equivalent of the Tuono. Now, historically, if we think about Aprilia as a brand, wherever the RS lineup goes with the RS V4 or the RS 660, the Tuono has traditionally followed. Now, what you get with the Tuono package is a more upright riding position, a little bit more comfortable, but you still get all of that same really exciting parallel twin engine. You get a really sporty chassis, top-notch electronics, and a bunch of other goodies that make it pretty much just as capable from a sporting perspective as the RS, just delivered in a much more friendly, upright, naked bike. So we are going to get into this first ride review, and I hope you guys stick around. So the first thing I want to talk about is one of my favorites in the past couple of years, that 659cc parallel twin engine. Now, the narrative that pretty much everyone has strung since it was first announced is that it's essentially just an V4 engine lopped in half. And while that's kind of true, you know, Aprilia is naturally going to use the architecture from their venerable V4 power plants to develop this. It really is its own engine. Now, it does share a bore diameter with the RS-V4 and some other architectural things, but really what you're getting here is a really exciting parallel twin engine. You have 100 horsepower and around 50 foot-pounds of torque according to Aprilia, and it's just a very user-friendly power plant, very exciting. You get on the gas, it's very tractable. You got a lot of really good low-end, mid-range, and top-end power. Now, the other thing that's really cool about it is you have a 270-degree firing order, which just gives it this really awesome, just beautiful exhaust note that is reminiscent of the V4 power plant. But one thing I really want to touch on again is that this is really kind of real-world performance that, you know, an intermediate rider to an advanced rider can really sink their teeth into, just hone in on, and have a lot of fun on the street, in the canyons, commuting, or on the track. Now, the other thing that I do want to talk about is the fact that there is one little hiccup with this motor, particularly in second gear and between 4,000 and 6,000 RPM. There is a little bit of a lull in its power delivery. Now, that's not too big of a deal. You're in the canyons, you just wake it up, and you can always stay above that point. But that's the only thing that I noticed, and it's interesting because I never noticed that on the RS 660. But as a whole, this engine is superb. Now, touching on some other things about the engine, you do have a 6-speed gearbox that is very good. And our bikes that we rode today are equipped with the $200 accessory, the up-down quickshifter, which in this case, I think works fabulously. Kill times are good, low and high RPM, everything works nicely. Now, moving on into some of the other things like the chassis. You guys will recognize this chassis from the RS 660. That beautiful aluminum twin spar frame, the engine mounted swing arm, and the fact that the engine itself is kept to nice svelte proportions and used as a stressed member to save weight. And when we talk about claimed weight, this thing comes in at 403 pounds. That's something that's really important. So when you think about that 100 horsepower, 403 pounds, that is an awesome power to weight ratio. Now, going back to the chassis for a second. Chassis numbers are about the same as the RS 660 as far as we know. So you have a very petite, short wheelbase, makes it very maneuverable. But importantly, it is a very stable motorcycle. The only times that you'll feel it get a little bit loose is, you know, over those big compression bumps at high speed. Of course, that's probably more to do with the fact that I like pizza a whole lot. But the reality is, this is a very sporty, sensible, and stable package. Now, when we talk about suspension, we are dealing with pretty much the same thing as the RS 660. You do have 41mm Kayaba fork in the front, and you're adjustable for preload and rebound. In the rear, same thing, adjustable for preload and rebound. The one difference between this bike and the RS 660 is the fact that the Tuono only has adjustment on one fork leg versus the RS 660s. It has cartridges in both legs, or adjustment in both legs, I should say. Now, moving on to the electronics. Now, first things I should say about this is that the electronics package is pretty much identical to the RS 660 and derived from the venerable RS V4 and Tuono motorcycles. Now, you get cornering ABS, cornering traction control, engine braking modes, ride modes, etc., etc., etc. And the one thing, the caveat I should say, is that the IMU is an additional $200. Now, we did not ride with the IMUs installed on our motorcycles today, and I found the fact that the electronics package was more than adequate. I think, you know, street riders, guys that aren't really focused on track riding, might not be interested in taking that plunge, but realistically, for my money, I would invest that extra 200 bucks, pick up the IMU, because it will give you a little bit more nuance to your electronic intervention, whether that be cornering ABS, traction control, wheelie control, etc., etc. You do get 5 ride modes in total. 3 are dedicated to the street. You have a commuter, a individual mode, and a dynamic mode. And then you flip the dash into race mode and you get a time attack and challenge. And of those 2 modes, you can adjust the individual mode and the time attack mode and disable all the electronics that you want and do whatever you want. So that's all good and dandy. Now, the main thing with the Tuono, and what I've kind of been saving for last, is the riding position. Of course, you have the obvious handlebar right here. And then you have foot pegs that are lowered just a hair, and importantly, have rubber covered foot pegs. Now that does something very important for the Tuono. If you read my RS 660 review, I said that it could be a little buzzy at high RPM. Now, you do feel a little bit of vibrations, but that rubber foot peg right there, you know, both sides, it actually quells a lot of those bad vibrations. So you do feel, you know, the engine living and breathing and doing its thing, but comfort levels are increased because you have an upward riding position, a little bit more leg room, and then you have this plush seat, which is not very common on sport bikes, but overall you get a very comfy thing. So if you are more focused for the street, commuting, canyons, etc., and you want to go and blast a track day every now and again, the Tuono might be your style. If you're more of a sport focused guy, you kind of live in the canyons and just, you know, go to the track a little bit more often, then maybe the RS 660 is your style. But realistically, when we're talking about sporting prowess, they're about on the same level. And that's always what the Tuono and RS V4 have delivered. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the fact that we're running a 320mm rotors up front, front wheel brakes, and you get nice, good bite, good feel, everything's all good there. So your stopping package and your stopping power is more than adequate. So we're going to wrap it up here with the 2021 Aprilia Tuono 660. You know, a very, very, very competitive middleweight motorcycle. And if you guys have any questions about this bike or anything else, go ahead and drop them down below and we'll get you some answers. Now, the last thing I want to remind you guys to do is go ahead and take care. So be safe.